welcome everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Method to Our Madness podcast. My name is Stacy Marola, PhD, and I'm here with my co-host Bill Pate. Today we have a special guest for you, Rebecca.f.pitkow, who has extensive experience in business development. So today we'll be talking about money, which is, important to everyone. Yay!
Yay!
Yay! So I'll let Rebecca introduce herself.
Hey everybody, my name's Rebecca Pitkow. I've been doing business development in the federal, state, and local space for about 20 years. I've recently gone out independently and started RFP consulting, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Great. Welcome, welcome. On this podcast, we tend to talk about, methodology. I know within business development, there is sort of like a method. There is a method to the madness. I don't know. Do you want to describe that a little bit in like a nutshell?
Sure. Well, I think like the methodology that people are most familiar with is Shipley methodology. I'm not specifically trained in that methodology. I use kind of an abridged version. That one has about 96 steps to it for those who are familiar. And especially in the current fiscal environment, a lot of companies don't have the bandwidth and resources to really devote to that 96 steps. So I probably have maybe like a 9 to 15 step process that we go through in order to qualify opportunities. But I think it's generally a kind of gated process where you qualify an opportunity, and depending upon the size of the opportunity and kind of the maturity of the organization, you might have anywhere from 2 to 5 gates before you get to actually writing the RFP. And then there's other gates that are kind of structured after the RFP is out so that you're continually assessing and making sure that you're devoting resources to those opportunities that you're most likely to win. And my biggest thing that I think companies need to be kind of better at is identifying opportunities really early on that are not a good opportunity and not a good fit. That way you are not devoting resources to those things that you can't win, and you're really kind of proactively going after those opportunities and those relationships that are going to be most fruitful for your organization.
So people might not be familiar with the gate language. That's sort of like a decision point, right? Like you make.
Yep. And then different companies can you can tailor, if you think of like a gate as kind of like a method of entry into the next stage, right? So that's why people call it gates. And at each gate review or decision point, there's different questions that an organization can tailor to their specific internal processes, and align that with their business intelligence and everything.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah. So how would, like, if you're, I don't know, our listeners are probably a range of people from, like, they might be some big companies, but also like smaller people, people just getting into the field. So I guess, how would you scale that? Like if there are a lot of people that are independent right now.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you like scale it down for an individual, basically?
Yeah, pretty much.
So I still think that individuals is really important. And one thing I see that I don't see a lot with individuals is that proactive forecasting of opportunities that are coming up. I think there's a lot of reactive bidding going on, like, oh, this looks like interesting to me, I should bid on it. And certainly, companies go on to win those opportunities, right? So I don't think you should shy away from reactive bidding, especially if it's something that you're really qualified in or with an organization that you've worked with before. But I think it's really important to also, if you're, for instance, if you're an evaluator that's based in Ohio, right? I think it's important that in Ohio, you're specifically looking at the Ohio procurement systems, the universities within that state, and other public and private entities, and trying to either talk with them about their forecast for the year so that you can be proactive and you can increase your chances of winning by developing relationships and understanding more about the programs that you're going to be bidding on ahead of time. The more intelligence that you can have the bandwidth, right, to obtain up front. So I would limit it to those areas for like if you're an individual, I would limit that intelligence to kind of either your local area or those areas that are most accessible to you at first. And then once you get that down, maybe you can move on to a different state or a federal entity or a university or a private entity like Microsoft or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
And then, you can even just have, one simple gate for yourself to decide, should I continue with this, right? And you can ask yourself some questions. What do I know? Who do I know? Do I have all of the capabilities? Do I need any partners with me to increase my chance of win? And then the more you start to understand about those opportunities that you're winning and losing, you can refine your gate process and align it to your specific kind of context and situation.
So from 96 steps to one.
Yep.
Efficiency.
And even that one step, you might think like, oh, well, that's just, whoa, only one. Like I'm not doing anything, right? But you're doing more than you were doing before. So incremental improvements are important.
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gate. You can just, iterate and get better at it. So what are some common pitfalls you see with people maybe either going after too many opportunities or not going after enough? Do you see one more than the other?
That's a great question. I think that I hear more about bidding, so I know more about, what those pitfalls might be. And I think it's just aspirational bidding, right? Like, I really like this program and I want to work on it. So I'm going to bid. Whereas an alignment of your company's specific capabilities and the areas in which you've previously worked is an important step that shouldn't be overlooked. I think people might be unrealistic about what their capabilities and experience really are.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of like a gap analysis, right? Kind of like what.
Yep. Yep. And like, a lot of companies will use, for instance, like let's say you do have like capabilities in that area, but you don't know how much you have, right? So you can do, like you said, Stacy, a gap analysis of each of the task areas and say, do I have these capabilities or not? And a lot of companies will not prime an opportunity. So even if you say, well, I have this friend or this other company that can do a lot of this work also, you need to make an intelligent decision about, am I the correct prime for that? Can I do the majority or the bulk of the work? And prior companies that I've worked for, we're looking to do at least 65% of the work, hopefully 75% of the work. So when you're looking at your gap analysis, that might be a percentage that you can look at to decide if it's worth bidding on at all and if you need a partner. But yeah, there's tons of tools that you can develop for yourself that you can just use over and over again for different opportunities to help you evaluate them. And I think developing those tools and processes is probably overlooked by individuals.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Could we talk a little bit about like the whole red team, pink team? I feel like that's really like a DC thing, but it could have applications for other people, like in other areas, the stages of proposal writing.
So there's many more color reviews, or I shouldn't say many more, a few more than what I typically use. But there's pink team, red team, gold team, blue team, green team, and white glove. And I typically go by pink, red, gold, white, and then I'll insert a green pricing review somewhere in there to align with the technical. And really, those are also a way of conceptualizing the level of content that should be in the proposal at each of those stages. So a lot of times by pink team, people will want about 75% of the content developed at least in some way, even if it's just bulleted points. And then red team is the real critical review where you should have, 95% of your content in there. And reviewers should be really focusing on being critical, making sure when themes are in there, you have all of the content, there's nothing missing. You're looking at the evaluation criteria at that point and making sure that the proposal has answered the mail. And then gold team should really be a final draft and a final review. And then you leave white glove as really just kind of crossing your T's, dotting your I's, running compliance before white team, and making sure that it's completely remediated and ready for submission. So that white glove is really just a right before your submission review. Gotcha. And then a lot of folks will put green team, somewhere around red team. That way you can align your pricing with your content before you get too far along.
And what's blue? What's blue team?
That's a great question.
I don't think I've done blue team before.
I don't think I've done blue team either. I can tell you what the blue team is though.
Okay.
So that is a specific focus on strategy structure, win themes, customer needs, and overall messaging. So a lot of that for me has been wrapped into red and gold. We don't have a separate blue, but I can definitely see a reason to do that, especially if you're an individual starting out, because I think win themes is something that's really overlooked. It's kind of baked into my brain at this point. It's like I breathe it, right?
Right.
But I think that a lot of folks could definitely benefit from a specific focus on it. And what is a win theme, right?
Yeah, what is a win theme?
So a win theme is really, so you have offensive and defensive distinguishers. And win themes often play off of those distinguishers. So they're kind of taglines and strategic messaging and walk away themes, like that, what you want people to walk away from your proposal with. So defensive distinguishers are kind of the things that everyone else is going to say. So if it's an evaluation proposal, everyone's going to say that they're experts in rigorous, mixed method evaluation, right? So you have to say it. But then you want to think, what is my offensive distinguisher? So what is something that I can say that no one else can say or very limited people can say? So if it's an Ohio evaluation and you work with multiple different organizations within Ohio and within that same ecosystem, right? If it's education, for instance, you've worked with multiple school districts or something, being able to say, I am from Ohio and I've worked within the Ohio education system for the past 20 years, that's going to be a big offensive distinguisher, especially in this market where you have federal contractors coming into the state markets and everything. You can let them know that you're a local evaluator with the experience in that area, and that's going to distinguish you from the rest of the Beltway bandits coming in and just saying that they're experts in evaluation and they've done it for all these federal agencies.
Right. That makes sense. It goes back to, I don't know, I was in another meeting and we had discussions about your niche. And so I feel like I keep hearing this messaging and thinking about what is your niche, and it seems like that applies here as well, like figuring out what's your
and then once you find your niche, right, and once you have that kind of solidified, right, and you're good and in that niche area, you have work coming in, your proposal language is vetted, then you can start creeping outside your niche, right, and say, what are the different areas that I can easily, that are kind of like parallel to this, that I can easily slowly pivot into, right? And expanding your capabilities in those areas. I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, those adjacent opportunities.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a folder in my computer where it's like, okay, these are proposals that I want to be able to do in the near future, but I cannot at this moment. And so I either need to build that capability or I need to partner with somebody who has that capability. Or I think better yet, even like past performance. Somebody, especially if it's like, oh yeah, I've done, these 3 projects in the last few years. Then it seems like for a lot of RFPs, that's important because it demonstrates recent experience that's, perhaps more relevant than, oh yeah, I did that once like 20 years ago. I'm sure I could do it again.
Right. I think that's really smart of you, Bill, because it keeps you also forward focused. So like even if you're not bidding on it now, it's still front of mind. So as you're creeping out of your niche area, you are walking in those directions that you already know you want to be in the future.
So I've been thinking about like the micro procurements and things like that, because even the states have those. Like I've sent out emails to all the small business, well, I think half of the small business representatives of various agencies in Maryland. I guess, do you have thoughts about, because some people might be kind of nervous about like cold calling or, just like, you have
Some of
thoughts
my
about,
best connections came from cold calls.
really,
Yep,
really? Okay.
yep, yep. Actually, one of my mentors was a cold call in like 2014. Actually, both of them. Well, no, one I met in person, I forgot. But yeah, one was just a cold call and it ended up resulting in work that my prior organization is still working on today and multiple other contracts. So it's been a great relationship.
Oh, that's
Oh,
great.
wow.
Yeah, so I don't, don't shy away from cold calling. It really only takes one good response to make it worth it. You know what I mean? So you may find yourself doing all these cold calls and feeling like, oh gosh, I'm never going to get a response, or, this isn't worthwhile. But it really only takes one good return to make all of that, busy work, air quotes, pay off for you. And that was a business to business connection, just to clarify, and resulted in multiple successive subcontracts with that large contractor. Cold calling to agencies is harder. You need to be more persistent because they're getting a lot of outreach, and that's where those distinguishers are important. So you can know what yours are, and you don't want to just send the same cold email to every single entity. You do want to take a little bit of time to tailor it. So you might have a cold, call or email template, and it's the same. It's primarily the same, but you leave space in the middle to cue yourself to tailor something to them. I think that's really important to show them that you know who they are and that you are aligned with what they need. But then, also calling and just talking to people is important. I also think knowing where you might be able to meet those people is important. So everybody goes to conferences, everybody goes to roundtables, everybody goes to, and you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in those spaces to meet the people in person as well. And I would say don't shy away from calling people multiple times, even if they don't respond to you right away. A lot of times procurement officials, it is their job to respond, and they do want vendors, but they're also overwhelmed, especially in today's environment. So you want to give them the opportunity to listen to your initial message and to call back, and hopefully they'll recognize your number or your name when it's coming through, and they'll be like, oh, I got an email from them. Oh, I have a voice. Let me pick up the phone and talk to Stacy today. I've been ignoring her for a while. We all get too busy sometimes. So give people the benefit of the doubt and just be diligent.
So do you recommend people have like a 30-second infomercial or something that they can like,
100% know
okay,
what you're going to say.
what you're gonna say?
Sound
Okay.
casual, right? Sound casual, but yeah, I definitely, before I call someone, especially if it's, a bigger opportunity, or I know that this is someone who has more work, I'll spend time understanding who they are, where they went to school, what they've been doing, all of that, so I can kind of profile who I'm calling, so I can understand, what type of messaging they might be most receptive to. Yeah, do your research for sure.
Do research. Okay, yeah.
But, speaking of like the micro procurements, right? And like, the more you get to know these folks who you're going to potentially be looking at micro bids from, the easier it's going to be for you to be successful in capturing opportunities, right? Because you're a known entity at that point. And I think with micro procurements, it's really important to limit your level of effort on them because they're so small, right?
Right.
So making sure that you have vetted proposal language for your company and what you do will help you go from, a 20-hour proposal to a 6-hour proposal effort, right? And then that's more in line with the amount of time you'd want to spend for a micro procurement.
Yeah, that's a great point about level of effort in your proposal that you don't want to, for some stuff, you don't want to spend like hours and hours and hours on it.
And that's really important to your strategy too, right? Especially as a single individual, it's only you. So you need to be really picky about where you're spending your time. So if, there's $100,000 opportunity, you should not be spending as much time on that as $1 million opportunity, right?
Right.
And how do you limit that? A little bit of upfront time, getting your proposal content, together and understanding where it is from prior proposals if you have them, so that you do have a proposal library of some sort to pull content from over time.
That makes
Right.
sense. Yeah, because sometimes I think people feel like, okay, I've gone after these different opportunities, but I'm not really landing anything. But it's like for each opportunity, they don't spend the time that they should have spent on it. And so it's like, it's not polished or they miss some stuff. It sounds like it would make sense for somebody to kind of do like post-mortem or like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to pretend like I'm going after this again, and I'm going to give myself like a time limit so that it doesn't take forever, but I'm going to intentionally go through this and like get the language absolutely right, and then use that as kind of like a template then for like
Mhm.
future opportunity or future similar opportunities.
And likewise, if you know that you don't have a ton of proposal content yet, maybe it does make sense to spend more time on a specific opportunity where it's very likely you're going to reuse a lot of that content.
Mhm.
Then you can consider it an investment in your company and developing that proposal library. As
Wow.
opposed to just, oh, it's $100,000. I don't want to spend, I just want to get this off my plate. Let me try to spend as least amount of time as possible. Well, why are you spending any time then, right? Becomes
Right.
the question.
Yeah.
If you're not going to do it right, then, you probably shouldn't do it at all because it's super competitive out there.
Yes, it is. Especially
And you
now,
can,
it seems like.
yeah. Speaking
Yep.
about postmortems, like you can, at least from the federal government, you can request like a postmortem from the reviewer or whatever, the procurement officer.
Mhm.
I see you're nodding your head. I guess you recommend that.
100%.
Okay.
Especially as a small business, there's FAR language that requires in the federal government
Mhm.
that requires agencies to provide a debrief of strengths and weaknesses and the relative trade-offs that they made. So even
Nice.
if you just get an email that says you didn't win, well, then you follow up and say, as a small business, I'm very interested. You don't have to cite the FAR requirements yet. You can just say, as a small business,
Yeah.
I'm really interested in a debrief to understand the strengths and weaknesses and trade-offs that were made because I'm very interested in competing on future opportunities, and this will help me as a small business. And they see those little words and know you're talking about that FAR language and are going to reply to you. But if they don't, then you can pick up the FAR language. And if anyone needs that language, I'm happy to provide it.
Okay. So is the debrief usually like an email that they send or
Yes, it's
okay.
usually like a PDF email. It comes in a very similar format from most federal agencies. And, a lot of state and local entities are going to want to provide this as well, because again, it's their job and they're interested in investing in small businesses and they want to have competition because competition will lower their prices, right? So they are
Mm,
interested, they want small businesses competing. So they have a vested interest in us too, so it doesn't hurt to ask. And even
Yeah.
if you don't get a postmortem from them, like Bill said, doing it yourself is really important. And that is something that we do after each bid to make sure that we're looking for our own strengths and weaknesses and we're understanding even internally what could have gone better.
Wow. I think I feel like I've been flying by the seat of my pants all these years, and this is just really great information about how to do this whole process better. I'm I'm just assuming, maybe it's just my own experience, that a lot of people just don't recognize this as being an important skill set or an important activity to really be on top of it so that, like you said, it makes it easier when you do go after a bid.
Yes. Discipline and process, although it may take a little time to develop, are going to reap benefits on the back end from efficiency all day. And so what do those things look like, right? Like what are the things maybe that as a small business owners should consider developing? I'd recommend having a really good compliance matrix for your proposal. You don't want to get kicked out of something you spent a lot of time on because you used the wrong font and you just missed it when you were reading the RFP really fast. So a compliance matrix and being diligent about checking your proposal for compliance is important. Making sure that it's aligning with both the instructions to the offerers and the evaluation criteria, and that you've set your proposal up right. I think a mini gate review process and like some questions to ask yourself to make sure, that you should bid on this. So you make your bid and no bid decision on opportunities with rigor and intelligence. And then a good proposal template that uses Microsoft styles is going to make your proposal creation process a lot smoother. You're going to be able to bring in other partners more easily and reformat their content more quickly if you're using a template that uses Microsoft styles. And then your past performance. I think having past performance already written that you can pull from is good first step to proposal content, even if you're not ready to get, technical content together. At least having your past performance references available, and a gap analysis. So a gap analysis of your capabilities to the scope of work requirements. And then of course you can add columns for any of your partners if you're having partners, so you can see that you cover the full breadth of the task areas. Those are kind of like the most basic templates to develop, aside from the business agreements, right? Subcontracts, teaming agreements, NDAs, stuff like that.
And that could be like a whole nother discussion.
Right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we should bring you back again for that.
Contract compliance. Yep.
Contract compliance. Okay, well, I think we're nearing the end of time. Anything else to say? Add?
If anyone likes what they're hearing and they're interested in talking with me about how I might be able to, help you get your mini proposal shop up and running, or if you need any help with anything, I'm available at Rebecca, REBECCA .F as in Frank .pitkow, PITKOW @gmail.com. And now you know why my business is called RFP Consulting. Those are my initials. I was meant to work in this space, and I'm super excited to work with other small businesses in the future and help folks grow. Something I'm really passionate about. I really enjoy seeing small businesses thrive and the families that they support thrive and the people, that are employed and the consultants and subcontractors. It's really personal and near and dear to me. I come from a family of small business owners, so I'm really invested in the small business ecosystem.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.